Bonjour tout le monde. J'ai déposé aujourd'hui le budget principal des dépenses et les plans ministériels 2024-2025 afin de fournir des détails sur la manière dont l'argent des contribuables sera affecté à la réalisation des priorités du gouvernement. The main estimates present detailed information on $191.6 billion in new spending and $257.6 billion in statutory spending to deliver programs and services to Canadians. This includes, for example, $5.6 billion in additional spending for the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, as well as $8.4 billion for Health Canada and $28.8 billion for national defense. These estimates also present the results of the refocusing government spending announced in Budget 2023. Now, as most of you know, over the last several months, we reviewed programming and operations to identify duplication, lower value for money, or misalignment with government priorities. Donc, avec cette initiative, nous recentrons les dépenses du gouvernement vers les priorités actuelles des Canadiens, tout en veillant à ne pas réduire les services et le soutien direct dont les Canadiens ont besoin. Il s'agit d'une approche pan-gouvernementale, chaque ministre ayant travaillé avec son département et veillé à ne pas réduire les services et l'aide directe dont dépendent les Canadiens. So as reported in the main estimates, we are on track to refocus $15.8 billion over 5 years and $4.8 billion every year thereafter. Let me be clear, this is not about doing more with less or arbitrary cost cutting. This was a careful and systematic process to ensure that public funds are focused on key priorities. This initiative was examining our budgets. We spoke with ministers across government to ensure that they are doing what Canadians across our country are doing right now, which is examining their own pocketbooks. And we are refocusing those funds on strengthening our healthcare system. As you've heard today, we've announced the pharmacare plan for our country, as well as building more homes. By exercising fiscal restraint in this way, what we're doing is ensuring that we can continue to invest in Canadians and in the Canadian economy for years to come, just as we have done since 2015. Comme présenté dans le budget principal, pour un grand nombre de nos priorités, nos investissements augmentent et ne diminuent pas, même si les investissements sont redéfinis au sein de ces ministères. Voilà à quoi ressemble une gouvernance responsable. I'm going to keep working with my colleagues to keep our fiscal house in order and to ensure that taxpayer dollars are prudently spent. So with that, I can take your questions.
The first word that you used was detailed report, but the detail that's missing is where all of this money that's being refocused is actually going. There is no way to see where those funds ended up. So why is that detail not there?
Well, I'd like to take you to the overall spend that I have allocated in the main estimates document. So it's $191.6 billion in new spending and $257.6 billion in statutory spending. So what we want to do is take the savings that we are seeing across ministries and put them towards the priorities that you are seeing in our main estimates. So that is affordable housing, that is healthcare, that is supports for seniors.
Details of what's being cut back and not the details of exactly where those funds are going.
The funds are going towards our government's priorities, and that is clear.
That's a general statement, though. That's not the detail in the report.
The departmental plans that you're referring to, perhaps, will isolate details relating to how they are coming up with the monies. And in the main estimates, you see the priorities of our government. They are there. And that's where the funds that we are reallocating are going.
We learned yesterday.
Back two ministries ago when you were procurement minister, you signed off on $2 billion worth of contracts with BTNX to buy rapid tests. You may remember, yeah, we needed a lot of rapid tests. BTNX didn't make them in Canada. There were made in Canada suppliers. Can you give us some sense of why, or was it a priority to spend that money, $2 billion, to buy made in Canada rapid tests rather than rapid tests made in China?
Okay, I thought we were talking about the main estimates today.
Is that still an issue about accountability and spending, and
It sure
we're just
is,
doing that?
and I will take you back to the pandemic, David, and I will take you back to very difficult days when we were under extreme pressure to ensure that our country had the PPE, the rapid tests, and the vaccines to survive. And what our plan was in the Government of Canada was to diversify supply chains. So we diversified our supply chains for every product, and you will recall at the beginning of the pandemic that we were pulling PPE from multiple jurisdictions outside of the country at the same time as building up Made in Canada PPE. And you'll remember that Minister Nav Bains was leading that charge from ISED. So it was coterminous. We were diversifying supply chains within Canada and outside Canada and making sure that we had made in Canada product as well. And by the end of the pandemic, we had well over 50% of the PPE that we were acquiring was made in Canada.
Yesterday, that a D&D employee named David Yeo was awarded a contract, the ArriveCan contract, while he was also CEO of Dalian Enterprises. You were the Minister of Defense at the time. Were you aware that he was employed in the department at the time? Were you aware that he was a benefactor of that contract?
I was definitely not aware. I was very surprised to hear this news. I am heartened to see that he has been suspended from his role as a public service employee, and due to this very serious nature of these issues, I know that D&D is launching an internal investigation into the matter. We are, as a government, in the process of suspending contracts with Dalian, but the answer to the question is no, I had no idea.
Message to taxpayers.
Madame Anand, est-ce que là-dessus, on peut vous entendre en français, mais j'aurais aussi une autre question sur CBC Radio-Canada. Donc, là-dessus en français, et ma question sur CBC Radio-Canada, c'est est-ce qu'il va y avoir bel et bien des coupes de 3,3 % comme c'était d'abord prévu? Là, juste clarifier dans les chiffres, on les voit là, dans les estimés budgétaires, il ne semble pas y avoir cette coupe. Alors, si vous pouvez nous clarifier ce qui se passe budgétairement pour CBC Radio-Canada.
CBC Radio-Canada. Donc, nous avons vu qu'ils ont fait des annonces avant les vacances de Noël. Mais ce n'était pas le cas que nous étions finir. Nous n'avons pas fini notre processus à ce moment. Maintenant, nous avons fini notre processus et nous avons décidé que le CBC Radio-Canada fait face à beaucoup de problèmes dans ce secteur de communication. Et nous savons que c'est difficile pour eux à ce moment. Donc, nous voulons maintenir l'accès pour les Canadiens de nouvelles, de toutes sortes de nouvelles. Donc, nous avons fait la décision de ne pas couper les chiffres, l'argent pour CBC Radio-Canada. Je sais que la ministre Saint-Onge va avoir une session avec vous pour expliquer les détails. Sure. As we know, CBC Radio-Canada, like all broadcasters, is facing financial challenges primarily due to drops in advertising revenue. Perhaps prematurely, prior to the holidays, they announced some reductions. At that time, we were not finished our refocused government spending exercise at all. We have finished it now, and we want to remain true to a goal of our government, which is to recognize that that industry is facing bigger challenges at a critical time for Canadians' access to news, information, and programming. And so we are upholding our support for CBC Radio-Canada, and we encourage that organization to uphold its important mandate and to maintain as many employees as they can in all regions of our country.
When it gets back to the Dalian,
If I could ask a question on when you talk about the reallocation to government priorities, can you outline what exactly those priorities are and how much of the allocation is going to each of those priorities?
As I said, the amount that we are raising in this refocused government spending exercise is $15.8 billion over 5 years and $4.8 billion every year thereafter. So what it is an exercise to see where in the system we can make sure we're getting value for money. This is not a one-for-one. We are pulling from departments and making sure that that money is efficiently spent.
Is the money going to?
The money is going to our government's priorities outlined in the fall economic statement and outlined in our budgets.
Okay, you almost said it before, though. You talked about housing, pharmacare,
Of course,
et cetera. I'm
of course,
thinking
and
television here.
I think you are well aware of our government's priorities, but let me spell them out for you clearly. Our government seeks to ensure that Canadians across the board can participate fully in our economy, and that means supporting vulnerable populations. That means putting $10 a day childcare and the Canada Child Benefit on the board, and those programs have ensured that women can participate in the labor force as a rate of 85%. Our priorities continue to support the green economy and marrying our environmental ambition with economic goals. So you have seen investments in the auto vehicle manufacturing sector, for example, the investments in St. Thomas, in Windsor, in Oakville, with the auto manufacturing plants to ensure that we can move to an economy where vehicles are electric. Those are examples of our government's priorities, and our savings from this exercise will be going to those priorities.
All contracts were suspended? Did you say all contracts with the government were suspended, not just D&D? For Dalian?
We are looking at contracts across the government with Dalian to seek to suspend those.
Is it a normal government practice to award contracts to employees in their own department, sort of outside contracts to government employees for work within their own department? Is there a rule about that, or should there be?
There is certainly a rule that would prevent conflict of interest of that sort. And I was extremely surprised to hear that this individual was an employee of the Government of Canada. But as I said, he has been suspended, and we are also seeking to suspend contracts with that company, Dalian. Je m'excuse, je voudrais parler français aussi.
Donc, est-ce que c'est normal qu'un employé comme ça ait été membre de la défense tout en ayant des contrats? Est-ce qu'il n'y a pas un conflit d'intérêts
À mon
évident?
avis, c'est pas normal et c'est pas correct. Et on doit avoir des lignes entre le revenu personnel et le travail pour le gouvernement du Canada. Et ça, c'est une ligne claire pour moi, et on doit suivre les règles comme ça. Donc, je suis heureuse ou contente que l'employé n'est pas là maintenant, mais on doit s'assurer que ça, ce n'est pas le cas.
Questions on mains, please. We only have about 5 more
Yeah,
minutes.
questions on mains.
Gentlemen, dividing $1 billion from D&D over each of the next 3 fiscal years. When you were Minister of Defense, did you see the potential for that?
So when I was Minister of Defense, I want to clarify that we were making historic investments in the Canadian Armed Forces and the defense of our country. And I will point as an example to almost $40 billion for NORAD modernization. And I will further point to a consistent increase in our defense spending under strong, secure, engaged since 2017, where our defense spending is increasing by 70%. And we will continue to invest in the Canadian Armed Forces and the defense of our country. That is the responsible thing to do, and that's what the Canadian public expect. But they also expect us to make sure that we are not spending money on things like external contracts unnecessarily or executive travel unnecessarily. And those are the items that I know were reduced in terms of Department of National Defense's submission to me. For more details, I'm sure Minister Blair will speak to it.
Madame, le commissaire aux langues officielles est en comité ce matin en parlant de votre ministère, Conseil du Trésor. Il trouve que vous êtes trop lent à adopter notamment les décrets. Il a critiqué votre ministère disant qu'il manque d'action en termes de langues officielles. Est-ce que votre ministère ne prend pas assez, je pourrais dire, à cœur les...
Nous continuons de travailler là-dessus. Et nous sommes en accord avec tout le monde. C'est urgent de finir le travail parce qu'on doit continuer de soutenir les deux langues officielles dans le gouvernement et partout dans notre pays. Mais
c'est parce que vous ne faites pas votre travail au bout de la ligne. Si le commissaire est comme ça, c'est qu'il voit qu'il y a des...
J'ai parlé avec le commissaire avant Noël et j'ai dit la même chose, que nous continuons de travailler très fort sur les langues officielles et c'est crucial d'avoir une situation où nous avons un cadre pour les fonctionnaires dans le gouvernement du Canada sur les deux langues officielles.
Est-ce que vous allez avoir quelque chose dans 2 semaines ou dans 6 mois?
Cette année, bien sûr, nous continuons de travailler sur ça, mais je sais qu'il y a 2 choses. Il y a le cadre, et ça, c'est plus aussitôt que possible, peut-être dans le prochain mois, et ensuite les réglementations, et ça, ce n'est pas dans les prochains mois, mais peut-être dans cette année ou l'année prochaine.
De M. Yeo au sein de la Défense, est-ce qu'on le sait?
Je ne sais pas, je ne suis pas là, mais peut-être vous pouvez demander à cette ministre.
What do you think the message is to taxpayers if someone like David Yeo is not fired for what happened here?
I would say that we need to make sure that public servants, this is a Treasury Board, from a Treasury Board perspective, we set down the policies for the Government of Canada. And I will say that ethical lines must be respected at all times. And that is exactly why I've asked the Comptroller General to ensure that he is pulling from all departments any contracts that are of a suspicious nature, including GC strategies, for example. And I will say that we need to make sure at all times that ethical lines are respected, and that is my message across the system. But we need to, at the end of the day, make sure that we are safeguarding taxpayer dollars, and that's exactly what I seek to do as president of the Treasury Board.
That's it for today. Thank you. Mr. Yeo was ran for the PPC in 2021 as an anti-vax